Welcome back to Some Parts Not Included, a podcast where three lifelong amputee friends hang out and talk about all things amputee related. My name is Amanda Marie. I'm a right leg amputee, and these are my co-hosts, the Jamies.
Hello, I'm Jamie, and I'm a right arm amputee.
Hello, I am James, and I am a left arm below the elbow amputee. Welcome back, everybody.
So today we are going to talk about emotional intelligence and if we believe that as amputees it affects our emotional intelligence. And some people might not know exactly what emotional intelligence means, is something I've discovered in my lifetime, I guess. So, Jamie, do you want to take a stab or start off by kind of explaining? Because I think this might have been your subject, actually.
Absolutely, yeah. So, emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize and deal with your own emotions, the ability to recognize and deal with others' emotions and how your actions affect others' emotions, the ability to recognize just everything to deal with emotions, basically, and be able to handle them. So, I guess I could start. So, I do believe that being an amputee really does give us more ability to be emotionally intelligent, or gives us more opportunity to develop emotional intelligence. And the reason why I think is because from a very young age, we have recognized that we are different in some ways, which especially at the age that we would have recognized it, or even some of the ages right after that, it would have been tough. It's a tough thing to handle, and a lot of things that come with that. Some of the early, what we would consider as the early difficulties or the early failures that we would have felt in our young ages. So anything as simple as not being able to do something because we couldn't figure out a way to do it with our amputations, or someone like teasing us and things like that. I think that those opportunities give us the ability to develop our emotional intelligence at a very young age, maybe even possibly younger than most would be given. And so I think that that really does help us to develop that pretty quickly, and develop that wholeheartedly, really. And I do feel like my emotional intelligence is pretty high, and I've had to deal with some situations in my life which are very unfortunate, and some of them, being, the passing of my mother was very tough. And then, some others, divorce and some of those things that came with that as well. But even more so, health wise. So, being a type 1 diabetic on top of also being an arm amputee has been a very tough journey, very, very tough journey, because there is no information and there is no anything to be able to help you walk through that journey. And so having that emotional intelligence to regulate my emotions, to find solutions methodically instead of just freaking out, just giving up, which I have done. I have for sure done that in my life. But I think that as my life goes on, I'm finding more and more that that emotional intelligence is a lot more developed, and makes it a lot easier for me to handle those things. What about you guys? What do you guys think?
I agree with you. I believe that when you are an amputee, you definitely deal with a lot more mature subjects at a younger age that you may not have had to have dealt with if you were fully limbed. And I
Normie,
don't think that's,
if
yeah,
you were
a
a
normie,
normie.
yes.
Normie.
If I was a normie, I would think I would like to think I would still be emotionally intelligent. However, I do think that a huge part of my personality and who I am is because I have one leg. It's such a huge part of your life everywhere you go. It's impossible for me not to look at other human beings and be able to relate, empathize, adjust my thoughts. And I don't want to say judgment, but like I reserve judgment because quite often, because I always think, well, you never know what the other person's going through specifically. They may be lashing out and you don't, maybe they're having an off day, maybe they've had a brain injury, maybe they're not aware that they're even lashing out. There's so many different things that could possibly be happening to be affecting someone's day. I like being able to regulate my emotions around it and not often let it ruin my day. Not saying that I'm perfect at this by any means. Their responses are something the older I get that I've been able to naturally become more mature, as most people I believe would. But my younger Scorpio self was a lot more maybe stereotypical Scorpio aggressive responses when I was younger, or defensive responses. And the older you get, you're able to separate yourself from your own emotion and not lash out, but reflect and then say, well, if I was in that situation, how would that be? Or understanding that we're all unique human beings, so we're not all going to react the same way.
Exactly.
So I think that's also super important. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I agree. I think that also I feel as an amputee we have to adapt so much, and not just physically but mentally. Challenges I've had even with surgery and as an adult, that I didn't experience the same things when I was younger. You still can have frustrations, you can still have doubt and insecurities, or feel vulnerable, and these things come up, but you don't live in it, I guess is a good way. You don't let it consume you. You become aware, oh, I'm feeling that way. My feelings are valid. I'm not going to turn them away. I'm just going to reflect on them to be able to understand why I'm feeling this way, so that way I can tailor my response, if that makes sense.
It
Um,
does. Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
also with other people, because and both of you, I love you both dearly, but I may respond to each of you very differently. I tend to be a very sarcastic human being, and I've come to discover in my life not everybody understands sarcasm or appreciates it or likes it or whatever. But you suck. Just kidding. So, I through experience or through just listening to someone's speech, their reactions, their behaviors start to become a lot more aware of who I can be sarcastic with and who I shouldn't be sarcastic with. And that's an ongoing practice, I think, for me, because sometimes I also just don't care and I just feel like being a sarcastic individual and being like, that's their problem, not mine. But yeah, I think that we all could say on that same page, we all do that. We all kind of adjust how we work with someone, knowing how their feelings are, whether they're super
Absolutely.
open about something or whether they're not and they're closed off, especially with other amputees and helping within our own community. We have a sense that some people handle that stuff really well and other people really struggle, and it's important to be mindful of both.
I think
Yeah.
it's really interesting to recognize that and I've been told many times before, because I am a true Pisces, that I am a sensitive soul, and so I think that even as an amputee, even more, I can feel others' emotions, just being around them, just talking to them, like there are so many hints for me that I can recognize as soon as I'm talking to someone, or as soon as I'm around someone, or even just the way they're typing, the cadence and the way they're saying things. There are just certain things that I can pick up on, and I can tell when someone is not doing well, and I feel it myself, and I can feel that pain myself. Um, and like I said, a lot of people say, you're such a sensitive soul, or come back later and it's like, sorry, I forgot how much of a sensitive soul that you are. And again, it's because I think I've been able to really develop how someone feels, because of these situations, because I understand emotions, or because I've been in situations where I can understand emotions a lot more. And I find that is something that's a huge bonus for me. to completely be able to, um, not always, but understand where someone is just by, just by sitting with them or just by talking with them, or whatever is the case. And I think that that's a super important thing to have for me. And I think that it's really beneficial.
I agree. I actually really love having it because I feel like without even people talking, I'm picking up on their cues
Hmm.
and their emotions like instantly. I don't know how you feel about it, but it also makes me want to communicate more efficiently with people when I do understand and be more mindful of their emotions. And
Hmm.
so I'm constantly trying to develop and work on myself. That's a huge part of my therapy actually, is talking about relationships that matter to me and
Hmm.
situations that are happening and wanting to understand how I can navigate them so I never hurt my loved ones' feelings, but I still have my own boundaries and still understand that my feelings are valid because inevitably we're all going to have, clashes or things that come up. But for
Hmm.
me, that's something I always want to keep developing, that part of myself. And it's an ongoing thing, right? Like none of
Absolutely.
us are perfect. That's who even wants to be. But I think just striving for to be a good
Hmm.
person is the
Yeah. And very interestingly, as well, is that during the worst of my worst times, um, I find that, because I take on so much of so many others' emotions, that, I do get more easily overwhelmed with even just mine. And so, uh, being that sensitive soul, being that emotional person, is that when I get so overwhelmed, I go into this place of like, I do the processing, step by step processing, where I kind of like disassociate, kind of, and I think, again, um, it's a very interesting skill to have. Not always beneficial though. And that's where I think, it can be that positive or that negative side of it, is that, especially when I'm going through something of my own, and then feeling others' pain, especially someone that I truly care about, that can just be like, wow, like, it's a lot, and then it's like, okay, well, now I got to go through the steps of like, what are my next steps? I'm now using more logic to speak to people rather than, um more of my sensitive side, because I go to this place where it's like, I go to a processing place basically.
Maybe that's why I feel like I'm kind of the same. Like I have the same, like that's why I get overly emotional. But I do believe that I absolutely agree with both of you that amputees in general, we have more, we develop more of an emotional intelligence in our lives just from what we've been through. After listening to you both sort of talk about it, like I identify with kind of both both of what you guys are saying. Like I sometimes, I get overwhelmed too sometimes with my own emotions when I'm going through certain things, and maybe that's the reason. Um, because I've sort of developed, a higher emotional intelligence through my life. As a kid, going through certain struggles, being teased, having, you know, dealing with adversity and like struggling to do certain tasks and stuff. I feel like I've been, and again, working with other and knowing and working with so many other amputees in my life, like that's one of the reasons that I wanted to give back and do that, is because I felt it. I know what it's like. So I've always wanted, that's one of the reasons I do this podcast, because I want to advocate for amputees and I want to help other people. I've always just naturally been that way without having really thought about it. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, really thought about it as a, a higher sense of emotional intelligence. It's always really just been there. And that's why I think an example of that is like when I see someone else being, um, put down because of something they can't help, or because, they're disabled or they're an amputee, or not even if they're an amputee, there's like any other reason. They're just, either they're in a wheelchair or they have some other health, anything, right? Like everyone has something, everyone's different in their own way. But when I witness other people being put down because of that, it's just like so infuriating. And I know most decent people would feel that way, you would hope. But I know one example was there was a friend of mine in high school, he was different. He was from Newfoundland and he had a weird sense of humor and he talked funny, and
Oh
but I
boy.
always thought he was hilarious. I always loved him, and he was socially awkward. He was a little socially awkward. He didn't really know how to fit in, but he would just be teased so much. But no one really knew that he was in a terrible, terrible car accident when he was 6 years old, and he was ejected from the vehicle. He told me he remembered hovering over the scene and seeing his body, which was he was in between. He said, he was brought back to life. Basically, that's how bad this accident was. Like he was 6 years old and ejected from the vehicle. So you can only imagine the mental trauma that would, or the physical trauma that would cause your body, and then mental trauma after that. No one really knew that, but me, because I got close with him from having defended him, because he was teased so much in high school that I guess like I just felt I know what that's like. And that's that emotional intelligence. You know what I mean? That's that empathy you have for other people when you're like, you see that situation and you want to help, you want to stand up for that person. And so we actually became really, really good friends, and we've been lifelong friends since then. He's a crazy dude. That's he makes me laugh like no one else can. And even if he is a little socially awkward, he is. No one understands it. Most of my friends that, when we were younger, I brought him to a party, and he was really big into taekwondo and kung fu and stuff, but he was really socially awkward, and people were like, "Who is this guy?" And I don't care. I don't care about that popularity stuff. I was always just like, this guy makes me laugh. He's a good person, and you know that
Mhm.
everyone's different. Like and as you get out of the high school drama stuff, like you get into the real world, right, where it's people treat you. It's the real world, right? Not like the high school drama. I feel like I bring up high school stuff a lot in this podcast. I don't know why. It's just like that was like half a lifetime ago, but it's relevant. There are lots of kids going through the same thing in school, so that's fine.
Well,
But
high school's a very pivotal moment of development in your life.
it is, yeah,
So it's your transition into becoming an independent, responsible adult.
Mm,
exactly.
All of that was very loosely
yeah,
worded.
did any of us really become any of that? But
No, man, there's lots of days I look around and I'm like, I'm the adult in this situation. I need an adultier adult than me because I still feel I was the youngest of four children, so my brain is always like, no, but I'm the youngest, so forever and ever.
I know I look around sometimes too, and I'm like, this, I did this.
Yeah, like who put me in charge of anything in life
Yeah.
is if you think the scariest part is I've been in management for 16 years, so whoever thought that I was the most responsible person of the group, a little terrifying, but you know, that's okay.
I know it's the same too when I have friends who ask me to help, and I'm like, really, I'm the one that you think of anyone that you know, anyone. Like I'm the one you asked to help you.
I feel that immensely, actually. I think another part too of emotional intelligence is the ability to well, like we said, control and respond to our emotions, and understanding that having a positive attitude is extremely important, even if you're going through something that doesn't make you feel positive. But there's also a boundary there where, when does that become toxic? I don't know if you can relate to that or not.
That's
I can.
that's a really great question. Because I honestly think that just a positive attitude goes such a long way. Like, you have to be positive. If you envision it yourself doing it, especially as an amputee, that's a huge thing. Like, if you can be positive, and it's part of acceptance too. Like, accept yourself for who you are, have that positive attitude. You can do this. You know what I mean? Like, this is the way I am, and I'm awesome, and just rock it and envision it, and it can be, and it will be. You know what I mean? So it's just
Yeah.
like, I've always been on that boat. Like,
I
I think a positive attitude goes such a long way, and I encourage all amputees to have that, and just be yourself and rock it. But this positive to- toxic positivity,
it's
it's
so Amanda and I
sort
have
of new to me.
actually, yeah, Amanda and I have actually discussed this a lot in recent years because we've faced things that simply suck. And for us to sit and say, it's all going to be okay, I'll be okay, is one thing. But to also be like, I'm looking at the silver lining in this. No, like, there isn't always a silver lining in every single thing that happens to you. Some things just suck. Some things
It's true.
you don't want to hear are meant to happen. That's insulting to someone who has gone through horrible things. And I like, and again, Amanda and I have had this, discussion a few times, and it's something that we've both, and I don't want to cry, but it's something that we've both struggled with so much, because so much of our lives I've forced myself to be crazy positive, and sometimes it hurts me in the long run. Sometimes, you know being like, you know what, there's a silver lining in this, like, everything is going well, like, I will, like, it's one thing to say, I'll get through this, I'll be okay in the end, and it's another
Yeah.
thing to say, this is a good thing, this is a,
Yeah.
I'll be,
Yeah. Okay.
and in a lot of those cases, what ends up happening, in my opinion, is that if you're constantly like, positive, 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 you never actually deal with the
Yeah.
thing that happens. You never actually face it. And I think, one of the when Amanda and I first started reconnecting again, one of the very first really emotional conversations that we've had is that we can feel two emotions at once. We can say, this sucks so bad, and I will be okay, but to force ourselves to not say, this sucks and I feel like crap, it is just kind of doing ourselves a disservice, and ignoring true emotion. I don't think that we should ever ignore true emotion. I think that in order for us to get over it and to get through it, we need to really face it. And so, as amputees, we face a lot of really crappy things sometimes, not all the time, not all the time at all. We've talked a lot about a lot of amazing positive things that happen because we are who we are, because we are amputees, but there are some real crappy stuff. um and I've in more recent years, I've really started to face that crappy side of things, and started to admit to myself that not everything is positive. And and that, like, as an example, I am in pain sometimes, and that's where I give myself permission. And again, this is a conversation Amanda and I've had before, like, where I give myself permission to ask for help, where I give myself permission to say this is crappy, where I give myself permission to relax, to take it easy for a bit. And I think that you're right. I think that we need to be positive to a certain extent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you identified too where that boundary is, right? It's when we're not being true to our emotions. And it's not to say like let the negative win. So for me, my experience was I would consider myself previously someone who was on the toxic side of being positive, meaning everywhere I went, I felt that for me, there was always a positive out of a situation. Something bad happens, that means something good can come of it, or I can pull a lesson from it. So, you experience something that makes you not feel good. Oh, well, now I know what will make me feel good. So now I can lead myself to this path in life through that understanding. And I thought that was applicable to everything. And then I started to have heart problems. I started to black out. And I needed to actually, like, I went to the hospital a few times because of it. And they couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong, but they were concerned specifically about my heart. So I did further testing, a lot of further testing. And my doctor pulls me aside one day and says, "How do you feel about counseling?" And that is not at all what I thought he was going to say to me. And I was confused at first, and I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "I've noticed you are always positive. I've never heard you say a negative comment in all the time that you've been coming to me. You always have a positive perspective. It's not normal to be that positive, and I feel that you have a lot of emotions inside of you that you are not willing, or that you have not willing, but that you haven't allowed yourself to explore and to feel properly because you think that this is what you need to do." So I was really open to it. I did start counseling because at this point I'm now being hospitalized for blacking out and my heart stopping. So my actual emotions were so deep and affecting me that it was physically coming out in these symptoms. So I started going to therapy. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how long it's been. Maybe 6, 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I think now. And it was the best thing I could have ever have done. And I learned through that experience that, yeah, I kept being like, "Oh, everything's going to be fine. I'll make it through. I always make it through. I know how to adapt. I know how to look at the bright side." There sometimes is no bright side. Like Jamie said, sometimes things are just shitty. And it's okay to just say like, this is just a crappy situation and it makes me feel awful. So, and I can correlate this really drastically to losing both my boyfriend and my mom 2 months apart. There is no bright side to that. There is no lesson. There's no positive mindset here.
There is
Okay.
no
It's
it was meant to happen. Sorry, Kat. There is no it was meant to happen. That, it's
People
just
have
shitty.
said those things to me though. People have said like, "Oh, there's a reason," or, "Look at all the good that you have now done since they've passed." But it's like, I was already doing good things for the community. This is just a way that keeps me going every day because I feel like I'm dead inside.
Mhm.
So to say like, yes, those things are great, yeah, but we already were very mindful and aware and very community based of doing these things, and I could have been doing it way better if I had their support and had their manpower and their help and their love. So sometimes things are not there. Sometimes things just suck, and that is okay. That is life.
Can we
But
Absolutely.
say that if there are definitely obviously things that are not positive and things that
yeah,
every human has to go through that sucks, or but getting through it makes you stronger, right? Like
for sure.
on the other at the other side of the when the light at the other end of the tunnel, like it makes you stronger to get through these things. It's not a positive thing to go through. at all. Like, and every human has to go through those things, like losing family members, and like that stuff all sucks so bad. Like, I can't even imagine. Both of you had to go through that trauma, and I dread that day. Honestly, I do.
It's I dread it for everybody.
Yeah.
However, there's a positive way of going about it. So I have had a positive attitude, such as I'm going to start a blood donation clinic in their honor. I'm going to do a fundraiser event. I'm going to do things in the community so it brings good from what has happened instead of, you know, relying on substances, allowing my emotions to overtake me, to go down negative paths in life that don't benefit me or my loved ones around me, which is also very normal in circumstances like this. So I also, like Jamie said, there's you can feel two things at once. So, and you can be two things at once. So some days I'm a potato. I'm a sad potato who cries on my couch and doesn't want to move except for to help my dogs, and I'm not leaving the house for the day, and that is okay. And then it's okay to be the next day turn around and work my butt off and raise 10 grand in a fundraiser, and it's I don't have to be both every day. I can be both at the same time, right? Or both forever. I mean, like you there's balance in
Absolutely.
I'm
that.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm always a potato, and Amanda, you have permission to change me to a potato for this recording. I'm always a potato, but I just work sometimes as a potato. So
but can I say I don't know a single person who doesn't like a potato, and they're very versatile and delicious.
Ah, yeah.
So this is a positive about being a potato. But really,
Mm.
it gives us time to recharge too, right? So
absolutely.
that's for me. Like, yeah, I don't want to live like that every single day of my life, but it also is giving me permission to heal, to process, to recharge, so that way I can leave myself. But yeah, that too. Bye.
Okay, just be safe,
That would be great. But when I leave the house to bring the best version of myself and still feel authentic when I do it instead of just feeling like I'm masking, right? Which is
Absolutely.
also why when I go out in public, I might not always say, I'm great, I'm fantastic. I might say, I'm surviving or not too bad, or, we kind of clutch onto some other terms that aren't so
Mhm.
negative, but they're
Mhm.
not lying either, right? So,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, it's definitely, I will say, being obnoxiously positive as an amputee has definitely got me to where I am today, though. So that I have no regrets of. It's just really beautiful as an adult to understand my boundaries and that we can actually experience more than one emotion at the same time, which I'm going to credit Jamie to helping me so much with that because I'm a complex human being. We're all complex human beings. Our emotions are complex. They're not black or white. They're an array of colors, and allow yourself to feel multiple emotions at the same time. So,
I was trying to think
Absolutely.
how this relates back to being an amputee. Like the
Well,
well,
positive
it's
is like,
it's all come from dealing with things from such an early age, I think, and that's
well,
basically
where
where
does
it's all based
positive
on.
talk or toxic positivity factor in to
So
being an amputee?
so when
You know
we
what I mean?
are
Like,
very young, yeah. So when we're very young, this is my opinion only, but you guys can agree or disagree. When we're very young, in order to get us through things,
yeah,
we're told to think positively constantly. And we're almost, I would say, almost forced to think positively constantly. And I think that it came from, and it comes from a very good place, and it is a very good
yeah,
strategy for that time in in our lives. I think it's a very good strategy for that time in our lives. But the fact that I never saw my parents' emotions around my amputation because of this specific reason, because we had to think so positively, I think that I grew up understanding that that is the only way to handle tough situations. And I think that that's what got me in trouble when I started to get overwhelming emotion that was the opposite of that and that I couldn't ignore anymore. Um, and I think that that's where that kind of comes from. But would you
I
guys
agree.
agree that, yeah?
Yeah, for
I mean,
me, that's the correlation too, James, to answer your question, is that I think it correlates to being an amputee because we are so disciplined growing up that to be positive, you can do anything. You have no limitations. You will get through this. It's all those positive things that are great. I wouldn't want to change that for anything. It's just also important to understand that sometimes we don't, like, you can push that too far. And so as an adult, my brain became so programmed through good intentions of trying to teach me to stay positive and be adaptable and these wonderful skill sets that I appreciate, but there needed to be maybe just like a little bit more balance with understanding when I'm allowed to set my own boundaries or explore my other emotions, right? And be like, okay, explore this emotion. And then once we get through that, find the positive,
And I
if there
think,
is.
I
yeah,
can
yeah. And I
understand that.
think that what realistically happens is that at that age, at that development age, we're not really, or in my situation, I didn't really experience anything that wasn't amputee related or amputation related. I didn't really experience many bad things that weren't amputation related. So for me, I started to paint all emotional situations with that same positive brush. Okay. And so what ended up happening is that I ended up using the same strategy for absolutely everything that happened. And
Yeah.
and that just wasn't helpful. It wasn't helpful for absolutely everything. It doesn't work for absolutely everything. And I think that that's kind of maybe where the mix up came from, or maybe I um where I had to start to develop different strategies after a certain age. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Yeah.
Honestly, it's like I have to. It just made me think. I'm also I'm paving the way and leading the way and navigating another amputee in her life now, and I'm like I want to make sure that I give her the best chance possible. Like I want her to be as positive. I want her to know that she can accomplish anything, but I don't want her to have this toxic positivity, as you say, where you have to sometimes, you know, things will be hard, things will suck, and you have to identify that, right? So, like, now I'm thinking about, you know, leading another amputee's life, and boy, is that stressful. Let me tell you, as an amputee as well. And you guys talk about like not, or like, having not, like Jamie, you mentioned being like a diabetic and an amputee, and there's really no one else that you can, there's not a lot of other people that have gone through that. Well, that's what I'm like. Well, welcome to my world now at this, where it's like, who else do I, where else do I find help, or who else can I talk to that's been in this situation that I'm now in, where I'm an amputee and I have an amputee daughter, and it's just like a WTF sort of thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how does that?
A little
And it's like,
emotional
we're,
gremlin.
yeah, absolutely. And I obviously, it's like, well, people have said like, oh, well, she has like, there's no one better to teach her than, someone who's been through it all. But it's still, yeah, sure. But it's still super nerve wracking, man. Like, all I want is the best for her. You know what I mean? Obviously, like,
Hmm.
my world is devoted to that now. That's my world now. Like, I want the best for her, and that's like my sole purpose in life now, is to like try and make sure that she has that, right? So
Hmm.
it's sort of nerve wracking now to think about that. And but this is great though. This is why this podcast is super awesome. Not just for everybody listening and all of our, amputee followers and non amputee followers, but for ourselves as well, to reflect and learn things, and to have these discussions, to think, about things that I haven't thought about before, like emotional intelligence, like toxic positivity. It's it
I think, James, just to even tie back to what you're saying, the between you and your daughter, I do think you are the best person and you do have the most experience. And it's just like parenting if you're able-bodied, that
A
every
normie.
generation, pardon?
normies, the
We're using
normie
normies.
Normies. If you're a normie, they try and do the same thing, where every generation really cares about learning from what their parents did and try to do better to their kids. It's a never ending journey where every generation is like, I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. So the truth is, we're all humans. We're all just trying to figure it out and we're winging it, right? And we're all doing it the best we can. So give yourself grace there, but you have the experience. So now you even are learning, like, yes, that positive attitude is so important, that determination is really important. But if you see her having a frustration, also, like, let her feel her feels for a minute, but don't let them like take over her day or ruin the situation. It's just like, release the emotions so that way you can move on from them instead of letting them
I've seen her get frustrated with things, and it
become bigger.
hurts inside. I get emotional. I'm like, oh, like it
Yeah.
because I feel it so much more. Emotional intelligence, man. Like with my daughter, that's accelerated now too, and it's like I've seen her struggle, and it's like you'll get it, kiddo. Right? You're gonna understand one day. Like she's so independent. She wants to do everything on her own, and I just know she's gonna be amazing, man. She's gonna be better off than I even was, I think, honestly. Like she's already getting there with certain things. So it's like, but I've seen her struggle and it hurts to watch her a little bit. It hurts me a little bit to watch that. But and I don't I have to know my boundary where I want to step in and help or where I want to let you falter
But
and
like with
figure it out a
every
little bit
parenting,
too, right? Like
with all parenting, that's trial and error though. So
mhm. Specifically geared, like specifically about her amputation, though, like specifically her doing
yeah.
certain things. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, that's going to be really hard for you, man. Like, I'm looking at her trying to, like, I'm just trying to think of an example, like getting dressed, putting on the other day, she was trying to put on a sock. And
Socks are
I was like,
tough.
so hard with one arm, right? She
Yeah.
put on her own socks with one arm. I couldn't even believe it. She's not even 3 yet. She puts her own socks on. And I'm like, how are you doing that? Dude, she amazes me every day to the point where I get emotional. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get emotional right now just talking about it. I don't want to be a sap. So I'm going to stop thinking about this stuff, man, because it's like, honestly, like, yeah,
It's okay to be
it's
vulnerable.
intense, man. It's super intense. Like just to watch her develop and like
Hmm.
figure things out and struggle and like get there and like not and just like yeah. And in my own head I'm like where's the line where I step in, right? And give her help or let her figure it out. And cuz I think there's a good like there's good and bad to both of that. Like you don't want to keep them in a bubble where it's like you want to do everything for them. No, you have to let them struggle. And with all of the amputees and amputee parents I've met in my lifetime and talked to, they've all had different strategies to down to like where there's been multiple amputees and they've been just like my parents just like they didn't cut me any slack, man. They just said you'll figure it out. And because I think it's yeah, and so there's like it's a little bit of column A and column B, and it's always a balancing act, and it's always going to be that way. So, but yeah, whew, I don't want to.
It's okay. We're all crying
I'm
in
gonna be
voice
I'm
recordings.
overclumped.
That's
I'm getting
okay.
overclumped. No, it's a be honestly. Any reason that I would get emotional because it's like it's a beautiful thing, man. It really is.
I would just like to add that tears are good, crying is good. It's a form of emotional regulation, just an FYI. So,
Absolutely.
I
yes,
agree.
it's a good regulator for us
Even
all.
as a man. It's good. It's good to
Yeah.
let some cries out sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Very important.
Well, I guess we're going to have to wrap on today's episode before James doesn't want to.
Blows.
Yeah, well, all of us, to be quite
Self
frank. We've
implodes.
all had our moments today, but I think it's
Yeah.
okay. That's why we are here, is to show our vulnerability, and hopefully that helps other people. So, with that being said, if you have any questions for us, toss them down below in the comments section. We would love to try to address them in our upcoming episodes. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you hit the like button as well as subscribe to our channel. And lastly, you're going to want to hit that little bell notification so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming videos in the future. You can find us on all social media at Some Parts Not Included. And until next time,
Bye,
peace.
everyone.
Toodaloo.